All right, we're recording, so let's get started.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining. This is the Kubernetes community meeting. As always, these are recorded and available afterwards on the YouTube channel. My name is Marco Ceppi. I work with a lot of Kubernetes stuff, both on Ubuntu with Canonical, and then also a lot of other projects that I have where we use Kubernetes for quite a lot of things. We've got a full schedule today, so we're going to start with a demonstration by Eric Johnson for Kubo, which is Kubernetes on BOSH. We'll have release updates for 1.7 and 1.6.5. We'll go through 3 SIG updates, SIG Cluster Ops, SIG Windows, and SIG On Premise. Then finally, a leadership summit synopsis. So since we've got a nice full schedule, we'll go ahead and start. Eric Johnson, are you ready and available to do the Kubo demo? Maybe not. Oh, there you go. Eric, I see you online now.
Yep. Hi.
Are you ready?
Right away. So I'm waiting for Megan to join. So she's going to demo the, she'll have the screen demo set up. And I'll have...
Maybe we could cover the announcements notices at the bottom of the agenda and then give you guys a minute or two.
Sure.
That sounds good. All right. So we'll skip down to announcements.
All right, so if we're skipping to announcements, I've got the first one up here, which is SIG architecture, and there'll be a little bit more about this in a minute, but this was one of the outcomes from the Kubernetes Leadership Summit that happened recently, about a week ago. And essentially, this is the SIG that I think people have assumed exists or should exist, and there was pretty much a united front on establishing this, especially after Brian Grant gave a great presentation on how he had seen some ideas about to break up the architectural strata of the project. So one of the early deliverables on this will be to approve some sort of architectural rings. If somebody could mute, that would be great.
Someone who should mute. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I'm meeting at 1 o'clock, so I'm going right now.
Holy moly. Anyway, yeah, SIG architecture. Yay. I'm in the process of setting it up right now, which is a relatively lengthy process to get all those things in place. But I'm going to be meeting with Brian Grant next week, ideally, to get some of the machinery of that set up. And we'll get the charter together and get everything happening. So, and I guess I have the next announcement as well. Sorry to hog the announcements. Also, SIG Azure meetings are now scheduled for 9 a.m. Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time Wednesdays. And there's a link in the community notes to direct you to the meeting minutes, and that will begin next week.
Great.
All yours, Marco.
Thank you, Jason, for those announcements. So it looks like Eric and Megan, I'm guessing you guys are ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Great. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. So we'll go through this pretty fast. So we're representing a large team here between Pivotal and Google. Have been working on this project for about 6 months now. And so what we wanted to do is kind of introduce it to you. We figured we'd start it off with the context of something that everyone's familiar with, right? Would be Kubernetes. Hopefully everybody's seen this whack-a-mole demo. It's really awesome. Whoever came up with this should get promoted, I think. It's great.
His name is Terry Ryan, and he is awesome.
Okay, cool. So we're going to start off with 3 replicas. We've got a master, some workers. We're running our guest book app. and Sam Ramsey comes along with his mallet and he whacks one of the pods. What does Kubernetes do? It comes along and it fixes that, right? Everybody knows this. So we're back up to 3 replicas. In the real world, right, Kubernetes runs on top of virtual machines. So what would happen if you're having a bad day and one of those machines dies, right? So in this case, you're going to drop back down to 2 replicas. And what does Kubernetes do in that situation? Well, we know it's going to reschedule a pod and everything's back up and running again. But actually, like, what happens with this VM, right? How do we get that sort of VM restored? And I'm sure that there's plenty of ways of going about doing this. And what we're going to show you today is how Kubo takes care of that. So over time, what we want to do is get back to this condition. Maybe another bad day example. We've got another Heartbleed that comes along. And all of those VMs that you're running on top of, you want to get those things patched. And so how do you do that sort of in a zero downtime way? Because obviously you're a sad panda. Maybe you've got a pain in the ass day, right? You want to upgrade Kubernetes from version 1.6 to version 1.7 when that comes out. And then how do you do that? Of course, with zero downtime. So this is where Kubo comes in. Note here, right, I'm showing a kind of a condition where the pods are rebalanced. That's not something that Kubo does. Kubo is going to repair the VMs, and then Kubernetes over time would probably rebalance your guestbook app. How does it do that? So it uses a BOSH, which is an open source project that was started by Pivotal. And Pivotal uses BOSH to deploy Cloud Foundry, which is a platform as a service, as well as many other things like MySQL or Redis and Rabbit. So in this particular case, right, we're going to talk about how we used BOSH for Kubo. So BOSH, as I said, right, open source, it handles release engineering, deployments, and lifecycle management. And it's modeled after Borg. So everybody, I think, has probably heard of the white paper, and we, of course, all know that Kubernetes, in fact, is modeled after Borg. So one of the things that I would say would be different about these sort of 2 approaches, Kubernetes, I think, was originally, and I saw that Brendan was on, he can correct me if I get this wrong, I'm sure. Kubernetes was modeled kind of more after the application perspective, right? You want to keep your apps up and running across a whole cluster of nodes. But at Google, we didn't really particularly care about the underlying hardware, right? And so if we had a machine failure, that's a human being that goes along and replaces that. And of course, Borg and Kubernetes are resilient to that type of thing, and that's obviously very well represented in Kubernetes. In the cloud world, where you're running on top of a bunch of virtual machines, though, Kubernetes doesn't, at least today, take care of the underlying infrastructure. And so this is where we're leveraging BOSH. So BOSH kind of does both to a certain extent. It will actually maintain the health of the applications that it's managing as well as the infrastructure. So this is what Kubo is. Kubo is BOSH plus Kubernetes. It's an open source project that, like I said, was worked on between Pivotal and Google. So what exactly is it? Fundamentally, it's a BOSH release. So as I said, BOSH can be used to deploy lots of different software, including Cloud Foundry. And what we've done is we've worked to provide a manifest file for deploying Kubernetes the hard way via BOSH. So this is not a fork of Kubernetes, or it's not any sort of changes to Kubernetes. It's the standard out-of-the-box Kubernetes experience, SIG clusters running on VMs, the whole bit. Some Terraform scripts today that will spin up some of the infrastructure, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second. And then there's a custom BOSH director. The BOSH director is the actual machine that monitors the health of the infrastructure machines. And we use kind of a custom version of that that's got a couple utilities baked into it for things like certificate generation and credential management. Over time, we like to get to a vanilla BOSH. And then as BOSH gains additional capabilities, we'll probably achieve that. So what problems does it solve? Obviously, you've seen a couple of this. The day 1 activities, right? How do you install Kubernetes? So this would be yet another way of installing Kubernetes. But where it starts to shine is with the day 2 stuff, right? So how do you keep this thing operationally up and running? How do you do rolling updates of Kubernetes versions, support HA configurations as well as multiple zones? And then also, how can you scale Kubernetes? Like, so if you want to extend the number of workers or even the number of masters, Kubo can do that for you. So demo time, I'll pass that over to Megan. She gets to do the fun stuff.
Okay, I'm going to start deleting a VM, and then we'll talk about what we're doing. Yes.
So that was just the standard gcloud command, right?
Yeah, that was just a gcloud command to delete a VM. So I have over here already installed a Kubernetes cluster using Kubo. The cluster has 2 master nodes with a load balancer sitting on top of them. And then we have 3 worker nodes with some pods running on them. We also have a cluster of etcd nodes that aren't in the picture, but they're there.
So just while you're on this slide, I guess the gray represents the cloud infrastructure. So this is a load balancer that we configured with Terraform to sit in front of the master nodes. And we selected Terraform specifically because we have a goal to provide multi-IaaS support. BOSH, you can cut me off if I'm talking too much. BOSH already supports multiple cloud providers. So what we want to do is obviously make sure that whatever solution we're providing at the infrastructure layer can support multiple cloud providers. And so we went with Terraform scripts to provision, say, a load balancer that would sit over multiple masters. But the workers, right, where we want to get to is using things like the add-on capabilities that Kubernetes already has to provision load balancers. So we're not doing everything with Terraform, but that's kind of where things stand today. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Up at the top, we're running a Kubernetes API call. So the point of this is just to show that the API is accessible. In the middle, I'm showing a BOSH command that prints out the VMs that BOSH is managing. And I'm just grabbing for the masters so you can see it more easily. You can see we have 2 master nodes here. And at the bottom is the Dynamite. I deleted one of the master nodes, I believe the top one. So it takes about 2 minutes to actually delete a VM because it tries to shut it down nicely first. But the point is to simulate a failure. So once that was a happy slide, the sad slide. Once the node is deleted, our load balancer will notice that it's not there. So it'll start sending all API traffic to the remaining master node. So we should still be able to access our API, and this command should not fail. And in the middle, we'll see that BOSH will say, I can't access this VM anymore. So it'll say it's unresponsive. Once the VM is, yeah, there it goes, unresponsive agent. That means that BOSH can't communicate with this VM anymore. It'll wait a little while to see if it's going to come back on its own, or if it's an intermittent failure. And if it's not, we'll see it be deleted off of this screen. And then that means that BOSH is now trying to recreate that node.
And I think you're also in the top right corner, right, where you're running the kubectl command. You've got a pretty short duration there that you're using with the watch command, right?
Yeah, it's calling this every 0.2 seconds.
So there could be, I would imagine, right, like at least a couple requests could potentially fail, right, as one of these nodes is being destroyed and then recreated.
Yeah, I think the health check only runs every 5 seconds on it. So, but that's the Google load balancer health check. So it should disappear within a couple more seconds here.
Yeah, I see your gcloud command finished. Right?
Yeah, the VM is now fully deleted, but we're still able to access the API. And once it disappears from here, BOSH will ask Google to create a new VM, and then it will start installing its agent back onto that VM. And then we'll end up, the next thing that happens is BOSH will start running all of the Kubernetes jobs, so like the scheduler, the API, and the controller on that VM, and then we'll be back into the same state that we were in before.
So I think in the interest of time, we'll kind of keep moving on and then just jump in and interrupt, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so kind of current status. Just yesterday, we released version 0.0.4. This is the first release that represents a decoupling from Cloud Foundry. So if anybody had ever heard of Kubo back when it started, we had this thing kind of,
Yeah, the node is now deleted, so it's currently trying to create a new node.
Okay. For the original release of Kubo, we did have this thing kind of married alongside of Cloud Foundry. But over time, we're looking at sort of decoupling that. And so this represents kind of the first release where we're removing the Cloud Foundry dependency. The other thing to mention, this is an open source project under Apache License v2. It is currently being rehomed from Pivotal's open source GitHub repositories over to the Cloud Foundry Foundation. So very similar to CN.
Yeah, there's our new master node. So now it's just it's going to start running all of the Kubernetes processes on it right now. But we're still accessing our API up here.
So we're moving it to Cloud Foundry Foundation. So I'm not too dissimilar to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Pivotal and Cloud Foundry, there's a separate foundation there. And what we're doing is moving the project over to there. Voting for this should be closed probably middle of next week sometime, in which case we'll have the project fully rehomed as a complete foundation-owned project.
Yeah, and now our VM's back up and running. We've got our 2 master nodes. There we go. And we were able to access the API the entire time.
So for roadmap, there's a couple things. Obviously, when we got started, we were trying to, as more of a proof of concept, kind of pre-alpha thing with Cloud Foundry. We did do some things that probably weren't exactly in line with Kubernetes, but we've since started to kind of move more towards that direction. So things like, like I mentioned, using the add-ons for the load balancer. We want to be able to support persistent volume claims. Some of the networking stuff was maybe a little too married to Cloud Foundry, so we're fixing a lot of that stuff as we move towards this pure open source standalone BOSH release. I've got a link right there to the current GitHub repository where the project roadmap is tracked, and that stuff will get moved over to the Cloud Foundry stuff. And then, of course, multi-IaaS support will be coming. And that is it. So here's a couple links for anyone that's interested in checking out the project further. The end.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, too, for the demo. Appreciate it. Very enlightening. So we'll go ahead and press forward then. Next up is release updates for 1.7. Don, I think you're muted.
Listen to the slides. Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you help me to share my slides? I put it into the meeting notes.
Absolutely. I'll open this up just a second.
Marco, you have an unholy number of tabs open.
You don't even want to know how many other browser windows with tabs there are. It's best to leave that as it is. Is it sharing okay? Can you guys see at least the window? Hopefully not all the tabs.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So we have currently we have still in the code freeze stage. And so the top one issue today we have actually is last week, since last week, it is the submit queue issue. And submit queue, it is initially we have the submit queue infrastructure problem. So we found those problems and revoked it by the PR from the submit queue. So submit queue right now looks good, but we have like a pool test failure flakiness, which kind of like roughly since 3 days ago, they have the 50% of the failure. So which is a huge effect our merge rate about the existing open PR. And this is top issue, and the release team is on this one. And also we are local engineer from the various team, like API machinery, and also other team, and even include the SIG node engineer. Even we believe this is not a node-related problem. So this is a top issue. If you have some idea and what's going on, and please help us to shoot on this one so we can speed up to increase our velocity of the merge rate. And another one it is we already cut 1.7 branch, and branch manager doing at least one fast forward merge to the 1.7 branch per day. And then we already created off the test grid, and please help us to monitor the test grid and make sure that it's green. So then we also last night we cut 1.7 beta 1, And there's the several better one. We only have the one issue from all the critical builds. Only serial build have some issue, which is known issue, and is related to the Kubernetes. Sometimes it is show it's not ready. So so rest of the critical build are green. So next one, it is the top problem right now. Our focus resolve those flakiness. So since last week, we resolved the several flakiness in the critical builds. There's a master verify problem we solved, and a slow and federation. So I linked to those things, and there's the issue open and in a detail. Then come to the top one in the flakiness, it is a serial, which is what I just mentioned, that we have the Kubernetes regression again. So a lot of flakiness, and recently it is introduced by the test infrastructure. So we have the release leakage issue and the quota issue. And thanks our test infrastructure lead, and he did a lot of work and tried to make sure with immediate standby for this whole release cycle, and also standby and solve those test infrastructure problem immediately. So last one, yesterday we board down meeting, we made all the decision for the exception request, and there's the 5 at the end. We have the 5 request, and the 2 is approved and approved in the queue, and the 2 is being rejected. There's the 1 still open for the final decision based on the testing. So the last 2 things I want to mention, and we still have the 156 open issues, and most it is already marked with the SIG groups. So we have that a while back, I sent the email. See, we have the by end of the June 9, which is tomorrow, end of the tomorrow. So we expected the SIG group leads to try their issue, open issue, mark for the 1.7 milestone, and make decision it is approved for milestone or not. And if it's not, then next Monday or sometimes we are going to remove all those open issues from the milestone. There also have like the last time I checked, there's around like the 30 issues. It's not marked with the SIG group. So the bug triage lead and I going to take action today, and to find to mark with the proper, or maybe proper, or we try to mark with the proper SIG groups. So that's all the status for the current one.
Great. Thank you for that update. Let me grab my browser again. Next up on the itinerary is 1.6.5 release update.
Dawn, is Anthony there with you by chance?
No.
Yeah, I pinged him on chat, so we may not have a 1.6.5 update today.
Okay. We can go ahead and just defer that then.
I had a quick release 1.7 question that I apologize if I missed the answer to. Did beta.1 get cut yesterday?
Yes, send out. And we also update the test status because there's the one serious regression with the Kubernetes, and the SIG network is looking into at that time.
Yeah, that's totally in the meeting notes, and you sent out to Kubernetes dev. I apologize. Thanks.
It's okay.
Great. If there are any other questions, then we'll move on to SIG updates. First SIG update is SIG Cluster Ops.
Yeah, so I wanted to just give a quick update on what we're up to. We have been right in the crosshairs of the cross-cutting SIG issue, which is trying to find where our important mission lies in terms of our role versus the role of the other operations-oriented SIGs. And so we had some really interesting ideas come up at the leadership summit, sort of how do we reinvigorate membership and get people involved in our SIG, because I believe that we serve a really important mission that is currently not, it's not doing what it needs to be doing currently because we don't have enough attendance. So basically we're going to be trying to get a lot more real world cluster operator stories in the room and get people to talk about the things that go right and wrong. And hopefully start being good stewards of prior versions in terms of the operator experience. So for me personally, I'm now deeply involved in contributor experience, and Rob is doing a lot of work trying to pound the pavement to get cluster operators into the room to share their stories. So essentially the bottom line is we just are really working hard to reinvigorate the cluster operator community and also provide relevant, useful information back to the project from that community. And if any of you all want to show up, that would be supremely awesome.
Great. Thank you for the update on SIG Cluster Ops. Next is SIG Windows.
Yeah, hi everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. This is Michael. I'm going to also give a quick update on SIG Windows. So about a month ago, we staffed the team again after a hiatus of about a month where we didn't really have many resources on it. So, and we're working hard on finalizing the plan that would take us the support for Windows Server containers to beta. Our goal is to have the plan and milestones by the end of this month. And currently we're working on a lot of the networking related things around getting Node Core to work with load balancing and going through the OVN and OVS infrastructure. That's it from us.
Michael, you said after a bit of a hiatus, you've restaffed. I'm taking that to mean Apprenda has restaffed. How much work have you been able to do getting other people who might be interested in contributing around Windows into the special interest group?
So we haven't had that much luck getting other folks to contribute to this effort besides Cloudbase. Cloudbase has given us engineers that are doing some of the networking work around OVN and OVS, but they're doing that work across the board, not just Kubernetes only.
Right.
On the Kubernetes only project, it's just Apprenda that's been able to staff.
Okay. Then I think this is a call out to everyone on the call. If you know someone who's interested in Windows or has a vested interest in seeing Kubernetes work on Windows, then getting them connected up with Michael is a great solution to that.
I will say that Microsoft is going to be pushing on this as well soon. We've got a lot of irons in the fire right now, but this is definitely something we see as really important to the community.
Awesome. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. The final SIG update is SIG On Premise, which I'll go ahead and give. So SIG On Premise, we've been focusing on understanding the landscape of on-premise solutions and problem space that's there. We're working towards building a very clear mission statement of what the SIG wishes to achieve, since it's still a relatively new SIG. So we've had a lot of great discussions and demonstrations. One area we focused on recently is helping to improve the documentation around what problems people will incur and how to overcome them for on-premise installs and deploys of Kubernetes. And that's what I have for SIG On Premise.
How can the community help you, Marco, in this? Like, where would you need help if people wanted to participate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do meet somewhat regularly every other week. And anyone who's doing any kind of operations or management of Kubernetes on-premise, we look to seek out your experience, how you overcome problems such as infrastructure like load balancers, storage, networking, and then helping us document those so that others can benefit from overcoming those hurdles where in a cloud and IaaS world that's not necessarily as prevalent. Next up on the topic is the Leadership Summit synopsis.
Okay, I don't think I've ever talked so much in a community meeting. Sorry for everybody who has to listen to me. So yeah, this was a really exciting event, and it was truly an honor and pleasure to spend time with everybody, a lot of people who are on this call. We met, and it was a very fully packed day. Essentially, the format was a series of presentations sort of assessing the current landscape of the project and some of those challenges. And then after that were a series of 2 blocks of 2-track unconference style meetings, basically with loose agendas that had been developed before. In the notes for the community meeting, there is a link to the folder, and that has all of the notes that were taken at the sessions and also at the summary session, which was after all the unconference style meetings. Now, these notes are actually going to be ported over to GitHub, but right now, because I felt it was important to share those sort of right up front so people had access, they're available right now. Some really interesting key takeaways. One of the big ones, and none of these are probably going to come as a shock or surprise to anybody, is that Kubernetes is a victim of its own success in many ways because it is growing so fast and there's so many things happening all the time. You also have this really rich community of both vendors and individual contributors, and vendors, individual contributors on their own time, and a lot of really interesting matrix of people working on the project. So one of the things that we really identified was that as a contributor, this can be a real challenge to negotiate. So again, the doubling down on providing the best open source contributor experience possible is a really big deal. So that's a big thing. And also to that end, many of the changes discussed about breaking code repositories up, providing more distributed leadership in terms of SIGs, looking at code coverage and all the things that are necessary to make the project successful from a technical standpoint. And also realizing that we're at a point of evolution in the project that stability is a really big deal. Providing a release that is going to be adopted rapidly and used by a very large number of organizations across the world, that requires, in some ways, an increasing level of diligence and care about what are we putting into releases, how much feature richness versus work on paying down technical debt is required. And I think that the appetite of the leadership present was really, let's take a good long hard look at what it would take to make Kubernetes as stable as possible. That doesn't mean throw out features entirely or anything like that, but I think people were really like, wow, this is now a thing. And I think somebody said, I wish I knew who it was or could remember who it was, but basically, we're not wondering if Kubernetes is a thing. It's a thing, and it's out there, and it is really making a huge impact on the world. So now our focus has shifted from build to now we have to really think about build and maintain. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect of this, and that was played out in a lot of the discussions. So SIG processes were also covered, and there's some great ideas about how to improve engagement, to how to make SIGs more effective. I thought a really great thing that came up was for biweekly SIGs, essentially taking the off week and making office hours for the SIG leads to answer questions or provide guidance. Or if you're a SIG, like say you're a SIG node and you've got a lot of other dependent things coming that affect your SIG or that you also impact those, if you have office hours, then other people can come and discuss those cross dependencies at that time. So another thing was adding office hours, just generally one meeting every couple weeks, where SIG leads can just hang out and answer questions or talk cross SIG lead and talk about those challenges and how to improve engagement. So it's all really good stuff. I'm not going to go through all these because there's a lot, but I mentioned earlier that SIG architecture was a ratified decision, and I'm in the process of doing all the machinery behind that, meeting with Brian Grant to really nail down the mission on that. Ken and some others had some great ideas about how to increase incentives for people who want to contribute, companies and individuals, because there's a lot of increasing maintenance burden, and it's sometimes can be a thankless job, and any of the people who've been on the release teams know how much goes into this. There probably is a support group somewhere for people who've done the release team. I have so much respect and appreciation for them, but it is a very difficult job. And so that's a big deal. And lastly, we're looking at the abstraction of kubectl as a way of addressing multi-repo issues, because pretty much everything that you're going to run into in kubectl also feels like that's going to come up in other repositories as we break these things down. So it's a learning moment, and basically you can read the notes there, but essentially this will be our test to see how does this actually work in a multi-repo world. Does the main Kubernetes repo serve as an umbrella? How do we do that? And we're also going to be looking at Cloud Foundry's model, their multi-repo model, as a way to see what successes and challenges they've had and leverage other community projects where we can learn from them as we move into a more distributed type coding environment. So that's it. Any questions?
I might have missed it. What SIG is this going through primarily?
So it was a triumvirate, API Machinery, CLI, and release currently.
Okay.
And there's probably going to be a working group as well, and that has not been organized.
No, that sounds great. It would be great to have one place to go to keep up to date on this stuff.
Yeah, I believe the action item I heard was for Brian Grant to put together a working group to organize this. And at some point, SIG testing will also participate in this.
That's great.
Jason, that was an awesome summary. I know I added those bullet points on you at the last minute, so thanks.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, everybody.
All right, great. Thank you again for that summary. Appreciate it. It's always nice hearing you. So that, I believe, concludes the majority of the agenda today. I guess I'll ask if anyone has any open issues or further questions they'd like to ask before we close out this week's meeting.
I'll jump in with the last of the two announcements because I don't remember hearing about SIG Azure meetings being bi-weekly 9 a.m. Pacific time Wednesday, which is noted here. And then a reminder to everyone who wants to comment on any of the governance work that the Bootstrap Committee has done. There's another week before we close up those documents and come back with a second revision and some more fine timelines for that. So the index and the presentation were added to the announcements here in the community list or community agenda. So take a look, read things, give us commentary, and we'll try to make this the best governance for the best open source project ever.
So just to put a fine point on what Sarah said, like any feedback is welcome, even if it's just a +1 of like, hey, this looks like it's going in the right direction. So
an excellent point. Thanks, Joe.
The worst thing is just to be saying like, oh, I'm not going to say anything because everybody else has got it. We really need folks to actually roll up their sleeves and read it and let us know that they read it and let us know what they think in any way they can.
If you want to put a +1, the best place to do that would be on the topic or the title of the topic or title of the steering committee charter doc. You can see Caleb and myself and a couple others have dropped LGTMs there. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Sarah and Cameron for putting together the Leadership Summit and having that event go so smoothly. I thought it was really great to see everybody there. I don't necessarily want this to be a self-congratulatory thing for an exclusive club of people who got to meet face-to-face while some of you may feel left out. I hope we did a really good job of making it as much information as possible available to the entire community. So I think Jace did a fantastic job of taking notes, as did all of the other note takers who volunteered. There's a Leadership Summit Slack channel if you want to go see what little back channel chatter we had. And so we tried to make it as focused, but as open and transparent a summit as possible. And I thought it was awesome. So thanks a whole bunch.
And special thanks to Bob and Samsung for hosting us. It was really
Absolutely,
nice.
yeah. The hosting was way better than a hotel.
Great, thank you. I suppose that concludes it for this week's meeting then. Thank you, everyone.
Us on time and ahead of schedule. Well played.
Thank you all.
Happy Thursday, everybody.
Happy Thursday.